Liberté.
Égalité.
Fraternité.
Liberté.
Égalité.
Fraternité.
Liberté.
Égalité.
Fraternité.
Liberté. Égalité.
Fraternité.
Liberté.
Égalité.
Fraternité.
Liberté.
Égalité.
Fraternité.
I like this part right here. Come on. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the till victory is won. Now we add a little something to it. Just to encourage you. We're going to take you to church later. Let's go! We'll keep marching, fighting till the victory is won. To all my brothers out there. Hold your head up, brother, till the victory is won. To all my sisters in the struggle. Keep believing, sister, till the victory is won. Till that day. Till that day comes. Hey. Let us march on. To victory. Till victory is won. Is won.
Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos, and I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College and Yeshiva University here in New York City. Liberty as a concept and ideal is widely expressed in American history. It often sets the tone for the narrative. Many see it as part of America's exceptionalism, its reason for existing, what it means to be an American. It's seen and played out in many of our most cherished monuments, documents, and lofty oratory. The Statue of Liberty, the Liberty Bell, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Give me liberty or give me death. One nation under God with liberty and justice for all. It's seen and heard in speeches by politicians and social movement protest leaders, in sporting events, songs, poems, films, paintings, our national anthem, throughout our religious, business, and civic life, even in our advertisements and commercials. There's a universal appeal to the idea. Noam Chomsky. I'm a fanatic lover of liberty, the liberty that consists in the full development of all the material, intellectual, and moral powers that are latent in each person. Liberties that don't limit us, but are the real and immediate conditions of our freedom. Nelson Mandela. To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. But America's reality has not been consistent with its rhetoric. One man's liberty has often been gained by denying or resisting another. Abraham Lincoln. Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves. For a country that portrays itself as rooted in liberty, freedom, and rights as ideals, America also has a history of contradictory actions and resistance that has restricted its fulfillment for many Americans. Vanguard organizations and groups like the American Civil Liberties Union and the New York Civil Liberties Union have been long in the forefront to guard, defend, and protect, pushing back to try and make America's rhetoric a reality. They face ferocious criticism at times, often by the same people who swear allegiance and devotion to the ideals of liberty. Liberty is a contentious, revolutionary idea, difficult to define and put into practice, not generally accepted by the authoritarian rulers, dictators, kings, warlords, despots, and monarchs who have dominated much of world history. The New York Civil Liberties Union was founded in 1951 as the New York affiliate of the American Civil Liberties Union, which was founded in 1920. Through litigation, advocacy, community organizing, and public education, its stated mission is to defend and promote the fundamental principles and values embodied in the Bill of Rights, the U.S. Constitution, and the New York State Constitution, including the freedom of speech, press, petition and assembly, freedom of religion, and the right to privacy, equality, and due process of law for all New Yorkers. Our guest today is Donna Lieberman. She's been the executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union since 2001. She also founded their Reproductive Rights Project. And during her tenure, the NYCLU has grown to over 185,000 members with 8 offices around the state. It's become the state's leading voice for freedom, justice, and equality, especially for those whose rights are most at risk: people of color, young people, and low-income New Yorkers. So, Donna, thank you so much. I know you're so busy. You've got such a hectic schedule. All kinds of things are going on, as we all know. So thank you for taking the time to be here. It's just an honor and pleasure. And haven't seen you in a while, but we go back to the stop and frisk days. And so again, thank you. It's blessed to have you here on the show.
Oh, well, I'm thrilled to be here. You know that, Jim. And thanks for inviting me to come on.
Thanks again so much for being here. I know our audience will really appreciate what you and the NYCLU has been trying to do for so many years. But let's make this personal at first. How did you get to be involved in the NYCLU? And how was your early childhood experience, your family background? What is it that got you to be so passionate about this work?
Well, you know, Jim, I grew up, I'm a child of the 60s, and I was born into a family that was very deeply committed to social justice values. Actually, I was born into a family that was deeply committed to equality and to fighting against racism when the rest of the country was not nearly as woke as it is becoming. And in fact, my parents were among the evidence used against my father in his McCarthy era loyalty hearing when he worked for the government in the post-World War II era, was that he tried to establish an integrated post of the VFW, which the veterans were all, the VFW was a lily white organization at the time. And my mom established a racially integrated nursery school during the war in Washington, D.C., which was also unheard of at the time. So the values were baked in. I didn't have to reject my family's values in order to get to where I am now. I did have to evolve them and develop them a bit. But, you know, I grew up in the anti-war movement, in the civil rights movement. They were part of my being. They were very important to me. And honestly, the ACLU back in those days was not on my radar screen. I mean, I knew about it, but I thought of the ACLU as not, I was about, expressing my political views. And I really didn't care too much about the people I disagreed with having the right to speak their piece. And
you were not it. Is that what you said? You were
yeah. I mean, I was into
SDS, right? SDS.
Yeah, well, you can't ask about SDS nowadays and say anything about it without explaining what SDS was. SDS in the early days was a democracy movement. It was a movement about, let the people decide, and empowering grassroots people from all walks of life to be heard, to have an impact on policy at a time when we were all very, very disempowered, and public policy was about fighting wars in Vietnam, to destroy, so-called communism, and keeping people from having equal rights because they were Black. So SDS started out as a mass student movement for democracy. It was subsequently hijacked by the weather people and broken up by factionalism that I honestly, abhorred. So yes, the first thing I did when I got to college as a freshman was to sign up for SDS. And I like to say that I majored in SDS in college, but I can't say that without explaining that my SDS was not the SDS that was hijacked by the Weathermen or other factions, and became kind of a fringe group.
We've had both Todd Gitlin and Mark Rudd on.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as a number of other SDS members of Juan Gonzalez, of course, at Columbia also. So we, and Mark, of course, has pointed out in his writings, and since then has been how stupid and he was at that time, and he's evolved into a much different sort of person. But you're absolutely right. That was hijacked, more of an authoritarian left came to play and so on. But so you are a hands-on activist, and
right.
you didn't see the ACLU as doing as much as you wanted it to do. And again, now NYCLU started in 1951 at the height of the McCarthy era. Mm-hmm. So that's and you were asked to join by Norm Siegel, who was then the executive director, correct?
Yeah. Norm brought me in, and I owe him I guess in doing so, he changed my life. And I'm grateful to him for having reached out to bring me to the NYCLU. I gave up a nice academic job with summers off, and I knew that I would live to regret that. But that's the only part I regret, is the summers off. But the NYCLU, back then in the 90s, was very much more committed to, engaged in a program to combat racism and discrimination than the rest of the ACLU, which at that time was still much more involved in First Amendment work. And when there was a tension, didn't really adequately address the competing interests. And some would say that, the First Amendment was on a pedestal and the 14th Amendment was out someplace else. To us at the NYCLU, the 14th Amendment, which establishes the right to equality and the right to citizenship for everybody who's born here and the right to due process, and the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery and should have been interpreted to abolish all the badges and the subsequent related harm of slavery that we are still living with and reckoning with, I would suggest, today. Those and the 15th Amendment establishing the right to vote, those were all kind of the second tier issues for much of the ACLU. And for us, they were like front and center. So the NYCLU at that time, was speaking out against police violence against Black people, and Latinx people and people with undergoing emotional crises. We did all that before, whether the mayor was Dinkins or Giuliani or Bloomberg. And I'm sure I skipped a few in the middle. And that has been, that's been baked in to our existence. We've been fighting, for, equal educational opportunity in a big way for decades, and identifying racism in the education system, not just in terms of who the teachers are or how kids are assigned to schools, which are really important. But, when I took over, from Norman to lead the NYCLU, one of the first issues that we identified and took on in a big way, and I'm proud to say exposed, was the way the New York City Department of Education pulled the NYPD into the schools and transformed school discipline, which should be a matter of detention, a trip to the principal's office, classroom management, transformed that into a criminal matter, and pursuant to which hundreds of kids and over the year thousands were arrested for misbehaving in school, and of course that was Black kids, Latinx kids, kids with special needs, and so these were and remain top front and center issues for the NYCLU. So we are a free speech organization, but we are so much more than that. We are so much better than just that, which is not to put down in any way, shape, or form the First Amendment. We love it. It's not boring. It's not what I used to think as a college kid. It's really important. And, we're an organization that I like to think of as, on the cutting edge of change, to make life better for people.
For ordinary, your distinction is very important, and you said it very, very well. The prison to the school to prison pipeline that you're referring to. Before we go further on issues like that, what did you think of the stand to allow or to support the Nazis' march in Skokie? I think it was 1977, 1978, as a free speech issue. One could go back to Skokie. One could also go back to Charlottesville. I'll admit that I've never kind of done the deep dive into what was going on in Skokie, so that I could be a little bit more nuanced. But of course, the ACLU has had to stand up for the rights of
despicable people, people with despicable ideas, and standing for the right of Nazis to march in Skokie, which I learned only recently was a community with a lot of Holocaust survivors, is something that had to be done in order to protect the rights of the good guys to protest and speak out. But now we understand, the Charlottesville example, I think, taught us a lot. That there are ways and ways to do that. We don't just go to court and represent people as our clients. Sometimes we're amicus in court, but we also put out public statements and organize and advocate and engage in political protest activity in support of a particular position. We testify in Congress and in City Hall, at City Hall, etc. So there are lots of ways for us to protect the right to protest and advocate for the right to protest, short of going to court and representing a particular entity. And I say that because with Charlottesville as the context. Charlottesville caused an enormous amount of internal Sturm und Drang about what the ACLU is. Are we a social justice, a racial justice organization, or a free speech organization? I believe we can and must be both. Mm-hmm. And we are unique in the political landscape for being able to and for trying to be both and to serve both values.
Donna, I'm sorry, I just want to make clear. I heard you say ACLU. Did you mean to say the NYCLU?
No, well, the NYCLU is an affiliate of the ACLU. And so we are part of the ACLU family. There are 50 affiliates around the country. And what we saw in Charlottesville is, there the decision was made to represent, the Tiki Torch guys, to represent, to stand for their right to march. And I believe that was a mistake. I said so internally, I've said so externally. You can still protect the right to protest and their right to protest without going to court on their behalf. And trust me, they had loads of other options to protect their rights. And what we should have been doing was pressing hard and using our position to insist and to press the police to ensure that both sides had the right to protest and both sides were being protected in exercising that right. And the thing that police can do and that they know how to do is to keep the diverging groups apart, letting them protest.
They did do.
They did not do that.
They did not do it, and it was up to
and it cost lives. So a life. So that's what I mean about being more creative and nuanced in how we do our work now. Back in 2000, the NYCLU represented the Klan at a time when the Klan was like pathetic. I mean it was like some guy had no following or whatever, and but even when Norman took on that case, right, he did so in a very careful way, making it absolutely clear that we are not standing for them. We are standing for the principle of the right to protest with a mask on, ironically with a mask on, and he made sure that every civil rights leader in the city of New York, knew it was coming, understood why we had to do it, and was even, and some even sort of came out publicly in support. And that's important for the NYCLU and our relationships. It's also important for the city to understand that, you have to tolerate uncomfortable stuff in order to serve a larger principle. And so it's a tension that doesn't go away.
Well put. Well, let me the issue of mass again, and
Yeah.
a certain amount of tension with the ultra orthodox, some anyway, feeling that their rights are being taken away as they seek to congregate en masse, various weddings or funerals or whatever, and they see the political reaction to try to control that as an infringement on their rights. What do you make of that tension?
Yeah,
Educational points do we need to make on that for all sides?
Yeah, there's so much to say about that. I think the most important, or one important point, is that, as a country that is founded on, the notion that we all have the right to go about our business without government interference, it's not quite that. It's actually, as long as we don't hurt anybody or put them in jeopardy. And so of course, religious freedom is fundamental, but the religious freedom doesn't mean that you're exempt from all the other laws, or that you're free to put other people in jeopardy. And what we have here is a claim and some really, horrifying practices that in the name of religious liberty put individuals who are part of the tribe, but also individuals in the larger community at serious risk of death. And so there's nothing in the First Amendment that gives anybody the right to kill anybody else or put anybody in imminent danger of getting seriously ill or dying, or becoming a vector for death and disease. And so that's what we have here. Do I think that the police should go into, and the Orthodox community and round everybody up? Of course not. But just as this is a public health issue, and so what the city needs to do is to be identifying people who are trained, who have a public health perspective, who will go into communities and with the message and the support services necessary to engage them in a public health campaign that is for all of us. And whether or not the people in one sector or another see themselves as part of a larger community, the job has to be done to try to engage them in protecting themselves and other people. And so having a wedding of 10,000 people on the streets of Brooklyn, is not a fundamental right. And it certainly doesn't give way when it creates the danger of death and disease.
Absolutely. Well understood. What do we do with Trump, though? What would you say to Donald Trump, though? It's the same argument can be made there. But...
Well, I mean, the biggest threat, to public health is sitting in the White House.
Absolutely.
The harm that this man has done to the public welfare on every issue, is just incalculable. It would be unthinkable, except it has happened, and I think we will be recovering from and processing, the devastation he has wrought for years to come. And sadly, I think that, somebody said recently, it's going to take us a generation to recover from this devastation. And I think there's something to that because, a whole, kids are so impressionable. And when the president of the United States behaves like the bigot that he is, and throws all the norms of democracy out the window and excuses all sorts of antisocial behavior and lies like a rug, that's really glued to the floor, it's going to take us a while to recover from this. I hope we're on that road to recovery.
I hear what you're saying. I think though that this generation is coming out. Black Lives Matter. It's a forcible movement. So perhaps it won't happen as long as you think, and we're in somewhat better shape. But at least we got to get through the election here and make sure that he's defeated, of course. But
I think that the irony is it's absolutely right to point out the irony.
Yes.
Of the racial reckoning that we are going through as a nation, and the bigot, in the bully pulpit of the White House. Absolutely, and maybe that was predictable, but here's I think we all have a responsibility to carry forward the new consciousness that has emerged and turn that into real change that will take us to a new place, and the new place is a new recognition and protection of equality, from against racial discrimination, but also against sex discrimination and discrimination against LGBTQI people, against immigrants, but also, as a nation, we have to recognize that we have been digging a deeper and deeper and deeper swamp, wherein money rules, and those with money have more and more and more money. I don't know what the hell these billionaires think they can do with their money, and why they need so much. It's like it's an addiction and worse. But I think we have to recognize that economic justice is essential if we are going to be able to bring our country together. The wealth divide is just incredible.
It is. It manifests itself in so many different ways, as we know.
And unsustainable.
Well, I'm saying this to you before the show. Why is your job so difficult? I mean, there's such contradictions. We are forever spouting the glories of our freedom and liberty and rights and this, and we all came here for, many of us, of course, some were, of course, brought here and so on, against the world. And yet, tooth and nail, we've been fighting so many people for the very rights and liberties and freedoms that we ourselves enjoy and want to talk about all the time. I mean, it's sort of crazy, right?
Well, I think that there's, I don't have the answer to why my job is so hard. I wish I did, because that would be the beginning of the solution. I get it, but the solution is actually huge, and very complex. I think that we've become accustomed to a two-party system, where political, expression and outpouring, kind of focuses on the electoral process, and there's way too much money in politics on both sides, and there's way too little by way of courage and principle that drives our politicians to do their jobs. And so I think that there's a couple of things that are essential if we're going to have a sustainable democracy. One is overhauling our how we do elections and how we finance the electoral process. In Europe, they have, in many countries, they have electoral periods, that are very narrowly conscribed.
Yeah.
And, that's not such a bad thing. It does have civil liberties implications, but I think, as with everything, there are tensions that have to be worked out. The notion that money is speech is such a crock, is so wrong, and limiting, I think, money in politics is an idea whose time is long overdue. And the other thing is, we've done a really crappy job of educating ourselves and our young people to the basic principles of our Bill of Rights and our democracy. I mean, the Constitution is a pretty flawed document, to talk about, freedom, with slavery. I mean, really. And we're living with the ongoing harms of that. But we've done a lousy job of teaching ourselves to think critically, and the importance of critical thinking, and the importance of some of these neutral principles that I used to scoff at, and that many people still do, like free speech, like due process, and like fundamental fairness. It's really boring to talk about process rather than to talk about what the process involves, but it's important. It's like freedom of religion and freedom from government religion. At some point, we as a nation, it goes back to, I would say, we could date it back to Eisenhower, but I'm too young for that. So let's say Bush, where government, the responsibility of government to provide minimum support for everybody, food, shelter, was something that was devolved onto private entities, and who was there to pick up the change, or to pick up the work, was religious institutions, and religious institutions that didn't necessarily provide a whole lot of charity. You're not providing charity when you're getting funded to do something. You're providing charity when you're funding it yourself, when it costs you something to do it. So every religious group in the country is kind of merging their own moral mission with their own, funding stream to sort of do supposedly good works. The Catholic, the charity roles of the Catholic hospitals are no bigger. In fact, they're in some cases smaller than in private for-profit hospitals. But their healthcare doesn't include reproductive health for women. So I think that it's important for us to do a long-term public education about why government shouldn't be funding religion. Government shouldn't be funding private parochial schools. Do you know about East Ramapo, New York? East Ramapo, New York, it's 40 minutes on the Palisades Parkway outside of New York City, 40 minutes from the city, right?
Right.
That is a place where the white community has controlled the school board for over a decade, and where the public schools are used by, or attended by, and have the responsibility to educate 99% Black and Latinx kids, right? but the white people control the school board, have controlled it through an at-large voting system, which a judge has recently declared to be an illegal violation of the Voting Rights Act because it gives the white majority that votes as a bloc total control and disenfranchises the Black community and Latinx community, right, who use the schools. White kids, all 100%, okay, I exaggerated, 99%, and that's not exaggerating, go to private schools, right? And they have systematically transformed, the school board has systematically bled the public schools, siphoned off money, some legal, some illegal, into the private schools, and destroyed what was once a premier school district, a school district that people moved to East Ramapo so their kids could attend, right? And created lasting harm to a generation of kids. We have won a voting rights lawsuit there, but this is like, this isn't outside of Birmingham or Montgomery, right?
Right.
This is right outside of New York City, and state government, the governor, the regents, the Senate, the Assembly have failed to protect the right of Black and brown kids in East Ramapo to a decent education. They have watched as this has gone on for a decade. The NYCLU just filed this lawsuit. We won it, and we're not done, because I am on a personal mission. And when I'm on a personal mission, you better watch out to make sure that we restore and inoculate the school district in East Ramapo so they can't screw the kids for another generation. So every kid who goes to school there gets an adequate, a better than adequate education, the education that they deserve.
Absolutely. And that, of course, could be easily extrapolated to the entire New York City public school system.
Well, the situation in New York City is very different from what's going on in East Ramapo, where white people have systematically disenfranchised the and hurt and diverted the funds in a corrupt way. I mean, I'm not the only one who says they're corrupt. The judge said it in the rule, in her decision, essentially. The Black and brown community. And we're working with the NAACP, which is like a fierce and wonderful organization in East Ramapo. And I hope that together we'll be able to make some really good progress, particularly since New York has made it very, very clear from the top down, from the governor's office on down. Governor Cuomo says that Black Lives Matter. Well, we'll see. We'll see. If this doesn't get fixed, then he's not telling the truth. So he has an opportunity. I'm so excited to see him take it. Anyway, but the New York City schools are a different kettle of fish. And man, are they a kettle of fish. I mean, the response to the pandemic, has, yes, exposed so many problems in, city, in public education. And it's a challenge, it's a tough job, but we have, there's so much that could be done to get things better and righter than they are. New York and it's not just about getting cops out of the schools. We need to do that, and we need to figure out a way to provide support for kids, not so that they're coddled, but so that they are supported in growing up, so that teachers know how to teach, and knowing how to teach means knowing how to manage a class, and knowing how to manage a class means knowing how to manage conflict and protect kids from bullies, and to support kids to build a community so that misbehavior that hurts other kids is dealt with. It's not swept under the rug. It's very difficult. It's very difficult, but we have the wherewithal, the brains, the genius to do that. But we have to, in this time when we've had to go to remote learning for for all the kids for a good chunk of time, and for many of the kids, most of the kids, I think still, the lack of imagination, the lack of creativity, and the blind, failure to look at the needs and possibilities is really depressing. But we're determined to overcome all that. So instead of, first of all, tests, instead, there was this big thing, the Bloomberg, and Obama, obeisance to the notion that if you give everybody a standardized test and you test them every day on every subject, then we'll be sure that they get educated. Well, I mean, that was the stupidest, most harmful policy, a person that a society could have come up with, and we have to ditch them. Yeah, tests are helpful in helping us diagnose problems, but they have become the be-all and end-all of education. And in a pandemic era, where remote learning is the order of the day, and we have to worry about engaging kids in school and helping them to remain socialized and become socialized, get rid of them. Get rid of the regents, untether them to graduation, and let's start letting teachers teach. Teachers we should have faith in our teachers. We hire them to teach. So let's let them teach. Let's let principals run their school. The DOE claimed in New York City that they were letting schools come up with their own plans for remote learning. That's a crock. I mean, they kind of, without rhyme or reason, accepted and rejected various plans, and basically forced most schools to accept what this one size fits all approach to learning. No, you have principals, they're smart people. Yeah, they'll screw up, and some are better than others, but they know their schools, they know their teachers, they know their kids. Let them do their jobs. Let 1,000 flowers try to bloom in this crazy pandemic instead of trying to control everything. And now is the best time to get rid of this pseudo testing screening of schools that has fostered segregation. And New York is so busy, coming up with something that'll work for everybody, that whenever you have a good thing, whenever you have flowers blooming and flourishing in a garden, right, they snip them off or trample them down. So if you have a school that's working, if you have schools that have figured out a way to have a diverse student body, right, then I don't care what rules there are for everybody else. Those schools should be allowed to exist. And it's not just about whether, they get 100% of their kids into college or 100% of their kids to graduate. It's about a lot more than that. It's, are they diverse, right? Are their kids thriving and
living good lives of love and happiness as well. Your mother would be very proud hearing your voice.
My mom was a teacher.
I know, that's why I'm saying that.
Oh yeah.
In a couple minutes, we could spend like days on this.
Yeah.
Everything you're doing. In the few minutes we still have left, tell us a little about your reproductive rights project.
Okay, so I will, yeah, I want to make sure to get something in about our election eve concert, because we're all like in knots about the election.
Yes.
And so the NYCLU has an annual concert. Up until this year, it was called Broadway Stands Up for Freedom. Now it's Sing Out for Freedom. And it is it's a coming together of the arts and civil liberties, and it's a joyful event. It's always wonderful. We have it at Town Hall. It's an appropriate place. And it's a little bit of information about our work and a lot of good feeling and singing, great talent, who come to perform. Celia Keenan Bolger, Gavin Creel, Laura Benanti, names that anybody who's been to Broadway knows. And even if you haven't, you recognize them when they start singing. And this year, we're having a virtual event. It's free. It's open to everybody. All you have to do is RSVP online. You can find it at the NYCLU website, nyclu.org. Look for Sing Out for Freedom NYCLU or Sing Out for Freedom. You'll get the information, you register, and you can, it's Monday night, November 2nd, election eve. Everybody's going to be flipped out about the election. This is your opportunity from 6:30 to 8 o'clock to sort of like just relax, be entertained, and take your mind off, but not totally off, because there's content there, what's at stake in the election. And then to get steeled up to vote, and then to go out into the streets and protest peacefully to make sure that we protect the results and get every vote counted. So that's our gift to the whole country, because it'll be online, it'll be live streamed on multiple channels. So including, I think, a lot of channels, but go to our website and register. About reproductive rights, do we have time to talk about that?
A minute or so. November 2nd is the concert. Want to make that clear. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, a minute.
So I founded the Reproductive Rights Project. I thought I could do it in like one day a week because it's abortion, and I realized that reproductive rights is not about abortion just, it's about having access to the information and services that people need in order to make informed choices, and most particularly people who don't have access to information and services, kids, people of color, poor people. And so our focus has been on reproductive justice, access to the full range of services. And we were instrumental in passing the Reproductive Health Act in New York last year. But also our next move has to be to pass a New York State constitutional amendment that will be called the Equal Rights Amendment, to protect women, to protect people of color, to protect ethnic minorities against discrimination, to protect women regardless of their pregnancy status or choices, to protect Black people and Latinx people and LGBTQI people, regardless of who's in the governor's mansion, who's in the legislature, and who's in the White House. And we know that we need that, because look what's happening to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
We have to make New York a safe haven. We have to be a safe haven so that people from all over can be supported, protected, and so that New Yorkers can be supported and protected and try to achieve that dream of equality and justice that Martin Luther King talks about. We got to bend the arc of justice. So the Equal Rights Amendment campaign will be a 3-year campaign, and we need everybody in this.
Absolutely. Donna, thank you so very, very much. I'm just reminded also that even the Pope has come out today for he's for civil
unions, yeah.
Civil unions for same-sex. So there's hope, right? Okay, hope in the world. You're doing your part. Thank you so much, Donna. Okay. It's an honor. I love you to death. Thank you so very much.
Oh, thanks, Jim.
Be at the concert there November 2nd. We'll tune it in. Thank you again. And thank you all so very, very much for watching us here on The Radical Imagination. We'll see you next week. Thank you again.
Said, hey, bird, what you a duck.